a seat, and welcome to Renovation Church. If you've never been here before, we're different, but we're fun. And that's, being a follower of Christ doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be. We make it that way, though, all the time. But I'm excited because it's our third birthday. We're 3 years old. We're out of the terrible twos. I think we're done chewing on things that we're not supposed to. But now we're on to the terrible threes, so we'll see what that does. We're going to watch a video real quick, and then we'll get back to it.
Jesus, I am so excited today. It's like I woke up and thought today is the day to get working for Jesus.
Kat, I'm so excited to find someone who's ready to take action and get things done.
Oh, man, I am that girl.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, I've got something perfect for you, so let's get started. What are you doing? Stand up. Remember, we were going to take action.
Yeah, but this is where I always sit.
Right, but I need more than this.
Oh, I know what you're getting at. Okay, Jesus, how much do you want?
What?
$50? Is that enough?
Oh, that's not what I meant.
Oh, all right. Well, 100 then, I mean, you drive a hard bargain. Okay, but, you might not want to cash this till next Friday. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
There you go.
Okay, Kat, really, I do think it's great that you want to give, but I want you to mentor a younger woman.
Ooh, yeah, right. Well, Jesus, I'm not really into, teaching people and stuff. I mean, I don't really get into that.
Okay, you know that woman at the office, Amy?
Yeah.
I want you to take her out to lunch. Tell her about me.
Well, Amy is different. I mean, really different,
I know, but she needs to know about me.
And I can tell the people at the church to call her. I mean, they get paid to do things like that.
I want you to do that.
Jesus, I just don't feel comfortable doing that.
What are you doing? I am waiting for my coffee, fighting off a panic.
No, Kat. The problem is,
Something to lighten the stress.
you're too comfortable.
A little light reading. Some lovely calendar choices. Would rather glue.
Kind of a loaded video there. So I thought all the way up until late Wednesday and that we were going to be talking about obedience and sacrifice. And then some point in time, the Lord just totally redirected things. And we're talking about today, we're going to talk about things a little different. We're going to talk about recognizing the emergency. And I want us to get our mindset in a place of understanding what it means to recognize and understand what an emergency looks like. Because we think automatically, we think emergency, we think 911, right? That's what we think. And I want you to understand, recognize is to acknowledge the existence or the validity of something or someone, right? We recognize, you see somebody you've known forever, you just recognize when you see them, right? Like, when I see Shayna, I recognize that it's Shayna. When I see you guys walk in, if you've been here a few Sundays, I won't say the very first Sunday because it takes me sometimes a few, but I'll recognize your face. I will totally demolish your name, I promise you. I'm terrible with names. I call my kids by the wrong names all the time. I don't know why we named all of our kids with the beginning letter C. That was the dumbest thing. It seemed so cool at the time. But now it's Car Chase Cal. I don't even understand. They're all it's one name. We're just getting one stocking this year for them. It's Car Chase Cal. It's going to say that on it. And they can just figure out who's in there. But, we recognize things. We recognize the people we work with. We recognize the people we go to church with. We recognize family members. We recognize our car, right? We get in the right car sometimes. I did have an incident. I'll tell you this. I was at lunch with some of my friends. I've worked at Walmart for a long, long time. And we'd gone to lunch at this place in Nixa called Godfather's Pizza. And we rode with my friend, and Godfather's Pizza is awesome. And we rode with my friend. He has a Suburban. We're getting done paying. We're going back to the car. And we're all standing at the doors and none of the doors would open. And this lady's at the door at the door of the restaurant what are you doing? We're trying to leave. And she's like, that's my car. And all four of us are at the wrong car. Right in front of it is his. And I'm like, we're ridiculous. She thinks we're nuts. And she's probably right. So we got in the right car and left. But we recognize things because we are around them, and as we see them, we recognize them even better. The more we see them, the better we recognize things. What's an emergency? It's a serious, unexpected, and often dangerous situation requiring immediate action. And I want us to understand that we've got to learn to recognize what an emergency looks like in our life. I think we would know what some emergencies look like, right? If we seen someone having a heart attack, we would call 911 and get them an ambulance immediately, right? We would do that because that's what we should do. We're taught that. We recognize that from videos and people teaching us, just you call 911, there's an emergency. If someone was choking at dinner table and you would immediately stop to help them, right? If they were choking, well, except for one time we were at Encounter and we were all eating and the only one that saved James Barnett was Hayden. We were all eating while he was choking. We didn't realize he was choking. Then Hayden's smacked him, not just a little smack. I'm pretty sure. But it was such a good weekend, we forgot about it. Yeah, 3 ribs out of place. But he saved his life. He recognized the emergency, so he took a chance to hit his friend. I don't know. It's man, there's some pent-up stuff here. You just hit him pretty hard. Maybe a little tap to start, and then the big hit. He went straight for the big hit. But James was still here to be with us, and we appreciate that. But you would help someone choking, right? Because that's what we do. If a small child was playing in the street, if a small child was out playing in the street, you would go get the child, or you would help the child, right? Because that's what we're supposed to do. All these are great examples of what it looks like when we recognize an emergency, right? And we've got to act. We got to do something with it. And we would. Most all of us would spring into action and do something. But what if someone didn't know Jesus and they died? Did we miss the emergency? Did we recognize the emergency too late? See, I want us to get to where we can recognize the emergency on the front side. Because I think the emergency when we're talking about Jesus is when there's still breath in our lungs, right? Because that's the time that we have to tell people about Jesus. We can make posts and maybe someone will like it and maybe they'll even copy and paste it. But the reality is what are we doing in our real life in these emergency situations? Or are we waiting for the next person to come up and respond instead of us doing what we're supposed to do? I think sometimes we're waiting for the first responder. Maybe the pastor will talk to that person. Maybe the associate pastor. That's what they do, right? In the video, that's what they do. I'll call them. They can do it. You know what I love about this church? One of the things I love most about this church is I can see the discipleship because I don't have to get called over for every salvation. I love that. I love that. I love that salvations happen and people come over to tell me about them because they were brave enough to recognize the emergency and lead someone to the helper. So I want us to get to that point. That's the sign of a church being discipled. I hear this all the time. Well, you're 3 years old. What are you doing to disciple? Well, we're working on things. But the biggest thing is that the believers are starting to grow and they're starting to talk to people that don't believe yet, or they're starting to help those that are new believers. I can set up 1 million programs, but if we don't start doing what we're supposed to do, it doesn't matter. I can have 1 million programs. You know what? About 10 people, the same 10 people will be leading every single program. But we've got to get to a point where we all recognize the emergencies in our environment, our coworkers, our friends, our family. We can't wait for somebody else to be the help. We are the 911. We are the one that's supposed to respond. Think about it. Think about those 3 examples that I shared with you. What if we were watching someone have a heart attack and we didn't call for help and we just sit there and we watch them have a heart attack? We'd be embarrassed. We'd be ashamed. Why didn't you help them? I don't know. I just watched them die. We would be it would be terrible. Think about it. If someone was choking and you didn't do anything, if you just, I'll tell you a little story. We were at Hanode. I don't remember whose birthday it was. She's not here, so that's why I'm telling the story. Tara, who choked on rice. She literally choked on rice that night, I think. But she had filet. Like it was a special treat night out. So with the kids were all with us, and I think Hayden had already gone to the restroom to try to help her. She was choking. I'm like, man, that filet is kind of pricey. And she's already got help. We shouldn't let this go to waste. So in my mind, I was thinking, the 911 help's already there. He's got it. He's standing outside the women's restroom because he can't go in there. Shayna's inside. So I'm jockeying in my mind. A good friend would not let this steak go to waste. But I didn't eat it. I took a bite just to see if it was as good as I thought it was. And it was. But I didn't eat the whole thing. Because she got better, got out there and ate her food. I mean, that would have been embarrassing. Eat your best friend's wife's food while she's choking in the bathroom. There's something wrong with that. But, she was getting help, though. So it was okay. She was getting help. These are the stories you can't make up. I mean, these are the things in life you're like, what kind of a friend am I? This is the same people, though. Shayna and Terry. You guys heard the story. They let me eat a crouton that fell on the floor. So I don't feel so bad about it. But listen, if someone was choking, we help them. Because what do? We're not going to sit there and watch them just choke and choke and choke. We're going to help them. Because that's the right thing to do. The small child was playing in the road like we talked about. You wouldn't just wait till a car showed up. You would go get that child out of the road one way or the other. No matter how mad or frustrated it may make you, you're going to go save that child. Because it's the right thing to do. You wouldn't just be that person, right, that says, well, we'll just see what happens. Well, we know what happens. Child plays in the road by themselves and they're not supposed to be there. Something bad's going to happen. Spring into action. We got to recognize the fact that living like Jesus, living for Jesus, living with Jesus as a saved person. This is for the believers in here right now. We got to understand that we have to treat everything in our life that is about Jesus like an emergency. We can't get comfortable. We can't get lazy. We can't get too scared, right? Because otherwise we'll let fear take over and we won't do what we're supposed to do. And today I want us to recognize the emergency. We're going to be in some scripture in 1 Peter. 1 Peter chapter 2, and we're going to be starting in verse 21. If you don't have a Bible, raise your hand. One of the guys will get you one. And everybody needs a copy of the Bible. You need to be able to have it and open it and read it. Because we need to understand that this Word of God has value. We have to treat every day like an emergency with Jesus. But we also need to understand what an emergency looks like. Sometimes we think we have emergencies going on in our life that really aren't emergencies. Sometimes we're stressed out about finances or relationships or things like that, and that may not necessarily be an emergency. But what we do need to look at is Jesus and that relationship and how we're handling it. We often treat our relationship with Jesus like a diet, right? I'll start on Monday. I'll start on this day because I need to start getting healthier, right? I'm going to start on Monday, or I'm going to start on January 1st. And we put these things in our mind that this is the day that I'm going to start. When in the meantime, there's things you could be doing. Instead of putting it off, there's things we can be doing. We do the same thing with God. Well, I'll start this Sunday, I'll go to church, and I'll get myself right, and then I'll start doing things right. Starting Monday. I'll clear it up with God at the altar on Sunday, and I'll start doing things right on Monday. Well, if we treat it like it's an emergency, like it should be in our life, our relationship with Jesus should be an emergency for us. Then we don't wait. We don't wait till Sunday or Wednesday or Real Life on Thursday or the Chicken Barn on Friday or the women's ministry on Monday. We don't wait for those days for the reset. We don't have to wait till A to B or Encounter for the reset. Every day is the emergency with Jesus, and every single day he deserves our attention like it's 911. But we got to get our mindset right. And so in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 21, it says, "For you have been called for this purpose, since Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example for you to follow in his steps." For you to follow in his steps. "He who committed no sin, nor was any deceit found in his mouth. And while being abusively insulted, he did not insult in return. While suffering, he did not threaten, but he kept entrusting himself to him who judges righteously. And he himself brought our sins in his body up on the cross so that we might die to sin and live for righteousness. By his wounds, you were healed. For you were continually straying like sheep, but now you have returned to the shepherd and guardian of your souls." I want us to really understand this scripture because this scripture sounds awesome. It sounds like a reset, a reboot, and a refresh of our life every day of reminding just how good Jesus is. And this is our example for us to remember that we are to follow in his steps. So the emergencies that we look at are either personal or they're social. Our emergencies we need to look at are either personal or social. And when I'm talking personal, you need to look at that very first example where it says, to follow in his steps. If I'm not following in his steps, that's an emergency. That's an emergency. Whatever has happened in my life does not matter. Nothing. My job, my wife, my kids, none of that matters. That sounds crazy, right? None of that matters until I'm back where I'm supposed to be with Jesus. Because none of that can be where it's supposed to be unless I've got Jesus in the center. Unless I've got Jesus as my example and I'm following in his steps. Yet here's what we do in life. Too often we go through our life, we do our thing, we realize, I'm off course. I'll hit the church on Wednesday night and Sunday, and I'll be fine. That'll be okay. That'll be enough. But all the rest of the days, we kind of just do our own thing. We follow wherever our steps land. Whatever happens that's how life is. The universe put me here. You hear all kinds of crazy things anymore. Listen, Jesus has a very clear example of how to live our life. The thing is, we've got to put in some work. We've got to get in here and read about what it means to follow in his steps. Because it's one thing to say, you need to follow in his steps. That's our personal emergency. Our personal emergency is first to get saved, accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, believe he is who he is. Because why call him Lord if you won't listen to him, right? Why call him Lord if you're not going to listen to what he tells you to do? Otherwise, you just call him that guy in the Bible they talk about, who will mean nothing to you, because if you're not going to listen to him, what does it matter? But what you have to do is you have to follow in his steps, and following in his steps is getting in here and reading about his life and how he handled situations. We're so quick to anger and so quick to get mad and so fast to respond to people that aren't nice to us with bitter anger and just bad tone. But the first thing we have to do is understand that this emergency is first personal. I need to follow in his steps myself, because I can't help anybody else know Jesus if I'm not following in his steps. That'd be like me trying to explain to you how to be like anyone else that I don't know, that I've never talked to. Like pulling somebody off the streets and saying, hey, I need you to act just like this guy. Well, what's he do? I don't know. I just pulled him off the streets. But Jesus says, listen, I'm going to give you the example of my life. And not only am I going to give you the example, God gives us like the territories he walked, the places that he went to, and the things he did, and the people he stayed with, and the conversations he had. And the things he went through with being insulted and beat up and treated just terribly. He gives us these examples so we know how to handle our lives. So that when these things happen to us, we don't veer away from following his steps. We stay focused on following who he is, even through the terrible times. But sometimes I think the terrible times are the easy times to follow him, right? Because anytime something bad happens, we go straight back to, oh, Jesus, help me. But when things are going really good, when work's going good, the marriage seems to be going good, the kids seem to be all behaving at one time, whoa, right? What? And everything's just going, and finances are good, the house is good, the cars aren't breaking down, everything's good. All of a sudden, we're not so in tune with this step because we start to think, I got this. I got this figured out. And we keep on walking, and we keep on walking in our steps, and I got this, and we forget to keep praising him and thanking him and appreciating him. And next thing we know, little nick at a time, we find ourselves in these terrible spots. How did this happen to me? I had it all together. God, why did you let this happen to me? And all the time, God's saying, listen, you were comfortable. You were comfortable. There was personal emergency after personal emergency all along this path. But you were so comfortable in the comfort of the moment that you forgot to thank and be in tune with the one that put you there, that brought you there. We got to follow in his steps. He who committed no sin and no deceit found in his mouth. We read that, we're like, man, I don't even know that I can begin to follow that person. Listen, that's why we need to. Because we won't ever on this earth achieve what he achieved, but we can sure try. And the only way we're going to try is putting in some effort, getting to know who he is. Well, how did he walk through this life and not have like this sin problem? Well, you got to watch him, hear his conversations, read about it, and see how he handled them. Because it says while he was being abusively insulted, he did not insult in return. I see it on Facebook, and it's so ridiculous. People fighting and arguing. I'm like, listen, make a comment and move on. Or how about this? Don't even make a comment. How about you take it to the altar? You know, there's nothing wrong with moving on. Maybe if you disagree that much, now you have something to pray for them with. Oh, Lord, I know that that's not in your steps. Instead of me saying something I shouldn't say, Lord, please reach out to them. And Lord, help me not to find myself there. You know, we got this new prayer wall over here. I think it's awesome. We believe in the power of prayer. This church believes in the power of prayer. Why is it there? Because I don't want just you to pray for stuff. Pin it up there and have the church praying for it. This is what the body's supposed to do. God said, and Jesus said, pray, pray, pray. Talk to the Father. He even teaches us how to pray if we don't know how to do it. He's trying to get us to understand you just talk. You don't have the words that are going to make the difference, but he's listening to his children. And he wants to hear what you've got on your heart. You're not going to smooth talk God into anything. You're not going to surprise God. You're not going to be like, hey, God, I need your help with this. What? I didn't know you were going through that. He's going to be like, about time. About time you came to me instead of trying to figure this out on your own. And I want us to get to where we are a praying church. I've seen miracles upon miracles in just the last few months. From the smallest little things to the biggest things. And it blows my mind because they're all the same. You know, sometimes we're like, man, that's a really big miracle. It's all perspective. Maybe that little tiny miracle was giant to somebody else. They're all God's miracles. And we need to understand that we need to continue to push in on being a praying church. In the 3 years, one of the things that just blows my mind, Steve posted something earlier about the 3 years. You know, this Sunday's our 3-year birthday. And I just think in the last 3 years, I have grown more than I've ever grown in my entire life. Physically and spiritually. I don't think they're supposed to correspond like that, but they have for me. But on top of that, I've got to see more things in 3 years of ministry from people just willing to be vulnerable and praying and trusting God than I'd seen in all of the rest of my life combined. And I've been in some phenomenal places with phenomenal churches with phenomenal people. But you know what the difference is? We're starting to see people that had no clue beforehand what it meant to follow God, and they finally just said yes. And once you start to do that as a body, it's unstoppable what God can do. When we believe that that's the truth. But we have to follow in his steps, having faith that he is who he says he is. And when we notice that things in our life aren't going right, it's got to be an emergency. Personally. Not a freak out mode, not a panic mode. When we're being insulted by other people, it's not a time to panic and freak out. Maybe it's a time to realize, man, the enemy is really mad at me. What are we doing, God? Because we must be doing something if they're getting mad. If the enemy's attacking me like this, then we must be doing something. Lord, help me to stay on your path and not my own throughout this, because I don't want to be by myself in this attack. Right? But do we do that? No, oftentimes we get defensive. No, oftentimes we get so mad and upset because of what they said. We automatically think, well, I'll tell you, I'll show you, I'll fight with you, I'll argue with you. When all along God's saying, this is a personal emergency in your relationship with me. This is an opportunity for you to show them how you follow Jesus and love them even when they act foolish. Not by acting foolish yourself, but by loving them. What's the other kind of emergency? It's social, right? Once we get ourselves in tune with Jesus and we learn how to bring ourselves back by following him, not that we bring ourselves back, but we bring ourselves back to him to stay on the path with him, now we can start to do some work. Now we can start to do some work. What happens, though, is a lot of times we get saved, and all of a sudden, I'm going to go save the world. I've got everything I need. Well, you should open this book. It's going to help you. It's going to guide you. Just because you got saved doesn't mean you have the ability to go save anybody. But what you do have the ability to do is to learn. You have the ability to partner up with someone, let them teach you how to walk with Jesus. And then as you learn it, as you grow a little bit, then your job as you bring in your personal walk with Jesus is to become a social butterfly for Jesus. Some of you are so introverted, you're like, I'm out. There's no section in heaven where it's like, hey, the introverts are going to hang out over here. We're all going to be praising together. So we've got to get past that fear, past that scared gut feeling, and we got to start telling people about Jesus because it's an emergency. It is an absolute emergency. We need to be teaching them about Jesus because Jesus has changed us, and our job is to go show them and tell them and let them see how he's done it. Not just beat them up with words, but let them see also how he's done it. Our social life should look as if we were walking with Jesus all the time. And this is kind of where I want us to rest for just a minute. I want us to rest on what Peter is telling us about following in his steps, about being sure we're lined up there. Because as we look at verse 25, it says, "For you were continually straying like sheep, but now you have returned to the shepherd and the guardian of your soul." Once we believe that that is the truth, once we believe that he is the guardian of our soul, that he will protect us, he will have us, then that is our open door to get out of the way and stop being so afraid. That's our open door to say, I'm protected. I have somebody, not just that can get me through a situation, but that's going to have me until the end of eternity, which there is no end, right? It's forever. 10 million years from now, if you're a believer in Jesus Christ, you'll still be with Jesus. 100 million years from now, if you believe in Jesus Christ, you'll still be with him. He's not ever going to be like, you're out, you're done, I'm moving on. There's somebody cooler I'm going to hang out with now. It's not a popularity contest with him. It's family and it matters. What real family should look like. Willing to tell the truth. Be transparent. Be loving. Not hateful, not backbiting, not rude, not disrespectful, but loving like Jesus was. Was he stern sometimes? Yes. Was he compassionate? Yes. Was he ever mean? Not once. Was he ever abusive? Not one time. Were they mean to him? Absolutely. Were they abusive to him? Absolutely. So are they going to be like that to you? Absolutely. We inherit this relationship with Jesus that is awesome because of our salvation that we get through him. But along with that comes a hatred from those that don't like him. And we have to understand that means we're going to have to grow some thick skin and be okay with being told things and being called things and not let it bother us. Because what the enemy wants to do is use those people to knock you off track so you're not following in the steps of Jesus. Because if he can take you out of your social situation and mess up your personal situation, then he has some victory. And we can't let the enemy have any victory. We've got to give it to Jesus 100%. You know, people often ask me, what do you do then? How do you get through situations? Through the hard stuff. Well, everything that you go through in life, everything you're going to deal with, there is an absolute answer for it right here. An absolute answer for it. And so I simply say, you got to know and ask, what would Jesus do? It's not just a really cool catchphrase or a wristband or a shirt that you can buy, but it's actually how we should live out our life. How would Jesus handle this situation? How would Jesus get through this season if he was walking in my place right now and this was happening to him? What would Jesus do in it? And then act accordingly. We can't ask that question, see the answer, and then be like, no, I'm still going to go over here. And expect to get the blessings and the good walk that we're supposed to have, or even get the protection that we're supposed to have, or the guarding of my soul like I'm supposed to receive, if I'm not going to be where it's supposed to be. I mean, when we follow Jesus, we have this protection, this guarding. Not that it's going to be perfect. He's protecting our eternity more than anything. We're going to have some fleshly wounds. But we are under this protection that we wouldn't have if we weren't following in his steps. Because sometimes he has to let us go through things to bring us back to where we're supposed to be. And yet we're looking at it like, God, why'd you let that happen? And the whole time he's thinking, well, why didn't you just stay where I told you to? You keep going off on these little rampages of your own like you have this great idea. Yet you haven't prayed for it one time, and you haven't asked what I want you to do. And even when you did kind of ask, you didn't listen to the answer. And never once did you say, what would Jesus do if he were in my situation? Because if I'm going to follow in his steps, I might want to put him in my spot. Right? So my challenge to you today is what are you doing? Ask yourself, what am I doing in my life? Am I understanding what these emergencies are that pop up? Or am I just running from fire to fire to fire in my life, from my relationships to my finances, to my children, to my work, and just freaking out one after another instead of sitting down and saying, whoa, this is way too much about me and not near enough about Jesus. This is way too much about me and not near enough about Jesus. And maybe you're in this room right now and you're like, well, I haven't even started that walk with Jesus. Well, then listen, you've just been putting out fires like crazy in your life. I understand. I remember being there. I remember thinking there's no way out of this situation, or there's no way out of this situation. I remember thinking that there was just day to day. That's how you have to live. You just got to just survive to the next day. Survive to the next day. And man, that is a rough way to live. When you're just trying to get through another day. When Jesus says, listen, I'm not worried about your days. So much so I've even got your eternity worked out for you. I just need you to follow me. I just need you to put your steps in my steps and let's walk together. That looks like prayer, and that looks like reading the Bible, and that looks like understanding that the more we get in a relationship with Jesus, the easier it is to take the worldly insults. The easier it is to take getting beat up by those that maybe even you care about. But as you take those things and you absorb them, he takes care of them. He's your energy. He's your excitement. Not moments, but Jesus is where you get all that from. Jesus is where you pull all that from. So that the only emergencies that you have in your life are about him. Am I on pace with him? Am I in his steps? And am I sharing him with other people? The only other emergency that there is if you ever see someone sitting alone in a church, that's an emergency. That's an emergency. You see someone sitting alone in the house of God and you haven't gone to say at least hi to them, that's an emergency. Because you don't know what brought them there today. There's some testimonies even in this room that if nobody would have gone up to them and said, hey, how are you? They may not even be here today. Because it's an emergency that those of us that believe that we share the love of Christ. It's an emergency. You're the first responder. You're not waiting for the next. You don't get to take a day off from first responding. You can't wait for the other guys to call. You know what I love about rural towns? Everybody wants to be a first responder. They want to toss on the jacket and be the fastest one down the road. Why don't we do that inside the church and then when we walk outside also? Be the fastest first responder for Jesus. I mean, the fires are happening, the emergencies are happening, people are on their way to hell, and we're sitting there waiting for someone else to be the first responder to share Jesus with them. There are people, even in our church, that sit by themselves sometimes, and we don't have a lot, but sometimes people sneak in here and don't get the hi or hello or a hug or something else awkward. But they need to know they're loved. They need to know they're loved because you need to know you're loved, and I need to know I'm loved. When we have Jesus, we understand what love is, but now we need to go dish it out. So it's time to be a first responder. It's time to put on the siren and get out there and do some work. That means that you've got to be in touch with your personal life with Jesus. You can't be the good first responder if you're always drunk or high or the one cussing every other word. How are you going to be the first responder like that? Or you can't be the first responder if you're sleeping with all the girls in town or all the boys in town, or you're doing things you shouldn't do. How can you be the first responder like that? You can't be the first responder if you're the one burning down the house. You've got to be in tune with Jesus. I have to be in tune with Jesus. So we can go out there and be the first responder for the lost. For those that are struggling even in their walk with Jesus that know him. They need us. We need others. So as we get ready to go to an altar call, I want you to have this in your heart. Lord, where am I at? Lord, where am I at right now in my walk with you? And are there fires that I need to put out because I've got things going on in my personal life? Are there things that if I'm good in my own walk that I need to be doing to help you with others? Those are things I want you to pray about. That's what we're called to do. It's so simple to say, but sometimes it's tough to do. The altar's yours.
Give the Lord
Lord a hand in some praise this morning. Amen. Oh, it is wonderful to have you here at Renovation Church. Folks, these altars are going to stay open. So if you have any issues you want to pray about, you're welcome to come on up. If you have questions, Pastor Dustin's back in the rear. We have lots of people who would love to talk to you. If this is your first time at Renovation, please fill out the Connect cards, which are back. They're next to the tithe boxes that are on the wall. Folks, if you have not been plugged in with Renovation yet, come through the week. Monday nights is a women's group. Wednesdays we have these Bible studies for all, but we have men's and women's and mixed and kids, and it is just wonderful. And like Pastor Hayden said, Wednesday night was just fascinating. Hazel, did you like Wednesday night? Wednesday night. If you haven't met the Anders, they're going to be here this Wednesday, correct? Again, nobody's paying attention to me back in the back. I think it's this Wednesday. They're going to be, so while we're eating and then after, it's going to be a question and answer time with them. And if you haven't been able to spend much time with missionaries, especially missionaries to the Muslim world, this is just fascinating. They said so many things that just stuck with me. One thing they said, and they're talking about, and folks, they were right in the middle of it. If Tajikistan, you can't be any further behind enemy lines than a place like Tajikistan, where you know it's all Muslim mosques and calls to prayer, and you have to operate kind of underground. And you know one thing they said that was interesting when they were ministering to Muslims was that all Muslims go become better Muslims before they become Christians. Think about that for a second. And it's kind of hard to get your brain around, but he said, you know, when they would be having these great conversations with Muslims, those Muslims would go and they'd go to a mosque and pray, and then they would come back, and then the change would really get started. Then they would really start understanding Christ. It's folks, Christ hears everyone, and Christ loves those Muslims just as much as he loves us. And one thing to remember as you're going out this week is Christ loves all those people that have no idea who he is that you're going to bump into this week. Just remember that as you go on. But they're going to be here. Nathan talked last Wednesday. His wife Tara is going to talk this Wednesday. I think she's going to talk a little bit more about the women's side of the ministry. And so so many of you folks here are called to go do ministry stuff and to go do mission stuff. This is a great time to come talk and ask questions, especially questions, for example, like, I don't know what God is calling me to. Well, neither did they. And now they've wound up with passports going overseas and staying there for a while. That doesn't mean that's your call, but it does mean that they understand what a call is, and they can kind of help guide you through it. All right? Folks, it is wonderful. Have you guys been blessed a little bit this morning? Let's give the Lord one more hand, and then let's go to him in prayer.